He said all his life he'd seen refugees fleeing from one thing or another, and it meant a lot to him to do something to record that in one way or another.
He had a poster of the war relief effort for Spain, which showed a woman carrying a child, and I think that remained with him as an image in his mind when he was designing, became known as the Unknown Refugee.
John Bridgeman was my father. My earliest memories, possibly around about 1951, he was involved in his studio building a very large octopus. And as a small child, this was fascinating. And this was actually shown in the Festival of Britain.
I'm John Bridgeman's husband. We're both art historians, and we met at a lecture, actually. I did go into his studio, and he would show me how he was modelling. He often used very odd tools that were designed, for instance, for dentists, in order to make those final little adjustments. So it's fascinating.
He wasn't a gloomy person. He actually had a wonderful sense of humour, sometimes quite bizarre. He liked the funny side of animals, I think. He could see the humour in what they did, for example, a cat playing with a ball of wool or a hare running around the field. He was a person who was absolutely dedicated to his art. He didn't serve in the war. He was a conscientious objector. He didn't believe in any form of violence, but he volunteered to help people who had been bombed or injured in some way as a result of military action.
He didn't really talk about the war, only occasionally would say how awful things were. And I do remember him saying that while he was part of this crew, Heavy Brigade in Fulham, dragging people out of buildings, some alive, some dead, that he particularly remembered a dead young girl of about 12 that he'd pulled out, and the mother as well, and the mother walking away from this scene of utter devastation. I think that stayed with him.
So I'm Chloe Johnson. I am Collections and Engagement Manager here at Leamington-based Art Gallery and Museum. I've got here a selection of the drawings that John Bridgeman did of animals, which I think are really charming. You'll see that they're often on very scrappy little bits of paper. So it was almost as though he had a sketch pad with him. He just wanted to capture the moment when he saw something.
He did paint and he did sketch and draw. He was an all-round artist. He didn't just do sculpture.
When John and the family moved out of Ufton, they came to Leamington, and he needed a new studio space. The major studio space was at Spurnell, in an abandoned church, where he did work on the refugee sculpture and adapt it to become more of a monument to the unknown refugee. But he also needed a workspace here in Leamington, and so he had this little studio built. This is one of the things that would have started off in wax. He would then cast it in this plaster, and from that plaster he would then make a cement fondue cast of it, or he would send it, if there was someone wanted it and wanted to have it, he would send it for casting in bronze.
He was approached by a committee set up by MPs to commemorate the exodus of refugees from Vietnam. He did the statue, they liked it, and it was sent to a foundry, and then it stayed there because the committee somehow lost interest.
The United States had taken many, many hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese, but we in Britain, we hadn't actually taken that many. And so it became, I think, a political embarrassment to the government, and this is why it was never cast.
My father had it moved and it was sent down to the foundry in Gloucestershire. Basically, they stored it for something like 20 years. It came to be called the Eternal Refugee because he and I think we thought that it would be not just the Vietnamese refugees, but all refugees should have some form of a monument for their flight from danger. It's taken something like, 30 years for the actual concept embodied in this statue to find a resting place.
The Unknown Refugee sculpture was actually intended to be at a site near Coventry Cathedral. It later became clear that wasn't going to work, and at that point the sculpture was offered to Warwick District Council. It sort of drifted, we went into COVID, things moved on, and then it got to the point where the plaster was beginning to deteriorate, and it got to the point that really everything needed to happen or the plaster was probably going to be destroyed. So we had one last chance, and suddenly the bits of the jigsaw started to fall into place and we began to realise this could be possible. And we finally now are at a point where that sculpture is going to go into Jefferson Gardens.
Michael and I went down to see it cast. It's an amazing story.
We're really excited because having a public art piece by John Bridgeman in Leamington Spa, where he lived and worked, it feels so right and it feels long overdue. So we're really excited that this is going to be in such an exciting, prominent place.
I think he would have been delighted, and it would have meant a lot to him that something had been said and a monument had been put up to this idea of the woman fleeing with the child away from danger and seeking sanctuary.
The ironic thing is the statue itself has become a refugee. It's a fulfilment of what he wanted to do.
It's absolutely amazing. It represents John Bridgeman so much. His experiences in the war, his compassion that he felt for mankind throughout his life. It's transformed this space in the gardens.
It works so well in this space. You have the river behind. It was always intended to show somebody as though they were walking out of the water. She's not too high up. It feels as though she's walking amongst us. We've just seen it happen, and yet it feels as though she could have been here for 100 years.
He was a very reserved man. I'm sure he would be very pleased that it's up, but I have no way of knowing what he would have said. I think he would have been pleased that a project has finally come to fruition after over 40 years. It's all sorts of emotions come through, and it is quite an emotional thing to see it there.
We're also very, very grateful to the municipality of Leamington and all the people involved who were involved in trying to get the sculpture settled here, and that includes Chloe and her team at the art gallery.
I think it sums up what John Bridgeman's values were and what he was trying to do. I mean, we couldn't have a better example of John Bridgeman's work to commemorate him in his own town.
I think it was an emotional thing for him to do this particular sculpture, and it is good that it's not wandering around as a refugee sculpture, that it actually has come to rest in a good place. It's found a home, and I think it's one of the best homes it could have, actually.